We still have some time? Let me share this with you. The speakers that are scheduled for this meeting, we all are aware of one thing. We're not the only ones in the crowd that's got a river in their belly. And we understand that. Any one of you could get up here and you get this kind of a atmosphere and the Spirit of the Lord and the love of God. Somebody spoke to me before the meeting started. This is not a church setting. There's no guilt put on you here. There's no fear put on you here. There's no condemnation. See, we don't care what you believe. I just don't. Now, you know, see, I don't care if you don't care what I believe. It don't matter. This is about heaven declaring a glory that has not yet been declared. And are you ready? How many of you, and this may be a strange question, and you may have to think about it, but how many would be willing to just let go of everything that you ever believed to find a precious truth of who you've always really been? Would you? You may have to. Some of you know this. Ava's not been in the Philippines. We've had the pleasure of being there twice. The first time we was there in the city of Manila, we met a young man that had been converted to some kind of charismatic group. And somebody had told him how to get wealth, how to get money, make money. And that was his goal. We spent 2 hours with him. We were supposed to be in his group Sunday morning to share with the group. We spent 2 hours with him sharing, Avis and I and another brother. It come right down to the nitty-gritty. At first he jumped in with both feet until he began to see the reality of where he was going. And the question was asked him, brother, would you be willing to let go of everything that you believe to have what you hear? You know what he did? He dropped his head. The lure and the crave and the excitement of recognition and the monetary things was more than he could let go of. So in these meetings, don't turn out what you hear. I'll hear things that maybe at first they don't register, they don't, maybe I don't understand it. Don't turn it out. Don't turn away from it. Let it go home. Let it take its residence in the house of God that you are. And just let the Spirit of truth that you are begin to tell you, hey, I mean this, and at first you taste it, might not taste good. Don't throw it away. Stay with it. Avis, you want to say something about it? No. Sister Barbara, you want to come and share something? Not really? And I know a lot of you are tired because you've been on the road. A lot of you have. We have, and you have. And so tomorrow we're going to start at 10 o'clock, and we're just going to let everything fall wide open. Will that be okay? How many is willing to just take off your boots and just let it fly? Yeah. That's Mississippi language. And it comes from the cotton fields of Arkansas, and I got it into Mississippi. Now I'm here in Arkansas. Y'all don't know this, but I was born and raised just a few miles over the next mountain over there in Arkansas. If y'all won't tell nobody, I was a cotton picking farmer. I picked more cotton than I ever did anything else. And I finally found out that wasn't really the best thing for me to do. So come on, Sister Barbara. This young lady is from, if you don't know her, you will know her. She's from somewhere in Texas. And she don't sound like us Mississippi folks do. And she sure don't sound like that Georgia man back there does.
Stay up here for a minute. Okay. Now, when Ray was talking earlier, when Ray was talking earlier about, you said divine intelligence? I have, I want you to read this.
You see, none of these speakers, we didn't plan this.
No.
Nobody told one another what we was gonna say, nothing about it.
Well, I'm not gonna find it right now. But one of the titles of one of my slides tomorrow is called Divine Intrusion.
Holy.
How many of you remember Pensacola, Brownsville, Toronto? Does anyone know what I'm talking? Who doesn't know what I'm talking about? Okay, Azusa Street, Cane Ridge Revival, Pentecost. Something was happening down through the ages where we would experience these moments of divine intrusions, where we are penetrated by something that is not of this realm. And all throughout history, we have experienced these moments of divine intrusions. And so as I was getting ready, and I mean, I tried to put something together for y'all, and nothing came until last night, and last night there's 22 pages that came. So I'm only gonna speak for maybe 10 minutes here, but I want you to be prepared for a divine intrusion. It's coming. And you may see me do some funny things, because I can feel it in my body. There's just a lot of energy that is available for these divine intrusions. I want to tell you just briefly about something that happened about 3 months ago. And it was one of the most crazy things. For those that are familiar with Texas, we have a feral hog problem. And feral hogs have very long tusks. And they can smell grub worms 18 inches below the surface of your turf. And what they do is they dig down and they dig with their tusks and they flip over the dirt. And it looks like your whole yard has been rototilled. We've had, I don't know how many thousands of dollars worth of damage done in our yard. And whenever they show up, I always know that nature is speaking to me that things are being overturned or rolling over. So, but we don't tolerate the hogs very often, and we try our best to keep them under control as best we can. We have a river that runs behind our property, and they're migratory and they run along the river, and it's hard to keep them out of your yard when they're looking for some worms. So anyway, Lyle, my husband, set the hog trap, and he sets it with corn. And of course, for those that know deer like corn too. And so what we do is we mix a little bit of diesel fuel in with the corn. And that keeps raccoons and cats and coyotes and everything else out except hogs, because I guess they think it smells sweet. So it doesn't bother them to eat the corn even when it's mixed with diesel. Well, so one night, Lyle set the trap because we had a lot of damage, overturned turf in our yard. He set the trap with some corn, but he forgot to put diesel in it. So the next morning, he hears our dog. We've got Harry, our Great Dane, is a 180-pound Great Dane. And he hears him whining at the back door. So he lets him out, and he sees Harry run towards the pasture land and sees out there that we've got a pig in the pokey. So Lyle comes back in the house, and he says, you know, we need to go out there, and we were leaving to go out of town. We need to take care of this hog. And so it's still dark outside. Lyle comes back inside. He's making some coffee, and a little while later, he looks out there, and he sees Harry, the Great Dane, out there by the cage. And he said, Barbara, did you let the dog out? And I said, no. And I call it senior moments because Harry was laying right there on the kitchen floor in front of us. And I said, he's right there. So he looked out again, and he said, oh my God, it's a buck. So we caught a buck in the hog pen. And he said, we need to get that thing out of there because it's flailing around. So we walked out to through the yard towards the pasture, and I said, Lyle, we have to stop. I said, he's going to kill himself. He was flailing himself around. Can I walk around? He was flailing himself. Was that loud enough? He's flailing himself around, and he had about maybe a 12-inch rack. And the hog pen is about this high. So you know that the deer was having a hard time in the pen. And every time we would get close, he would rear his head up, and the whole cage, which is probably 4 by 6 foot, was moving several inches. This is how hard he was rocking the cage. And I said, we have to stop because he's going to kill himself. So we stopped, but it didn't make any difference. The buck was still going crazy. And so we ran over to the cage, and it's a spring-loaded cage. And every time that Lyle got a hold of the gate, which is spring-loaded pretty tight to keep the hogs in, it would slip out of his hands because the buck would hit the grid again and move the whole cage. And so it was kind of tricky getting the gate open. Once we got the gate open, Lyle is on this side of the pen, and the buck is over on this side of the pen trying to get away from us. And again, his horns were the grid of a hog pen. They're about maybe a 6 by 6 inch square, and so his horns would go up through the grid and come back down again, and he would literally put his whole rack back and try to jump out snout first. And this poor deer was bleeding profusely, and it just broke my heart. And so Lyle said, go around to the other side of the cage, Barbara, and try to spook him to go out the gate. And so I walked over to the side of the cage, and I got to where I was maybe 12 inches away from his face. And the buck had punctured his sinus cavity, so that blood was bubbling out. And I leaned over, and I looked into his eyes, and he held perfectly still. And I connected to the deer. And I said, and I had tears running down my eyes, and I said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And the deer, big brown eyes, just, and he's breathing hard and fast, and bubbles of blood are coming up out of his sinus cavity. And I said, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. All you need to do is put your head down, turn around, put your head down, turn around, I said that 3 times, tears streaming down my face, blood dripping profusely under his body. And he looked at me, and he looked at his face. And darted up again. And I say this to you because that's us. I knew that I was having this experience and connecting with this animal because I was in a system for decades. And I beat myself up in this cage. I bucked against the system. I threw my head up. I was bloody. Weren't we all inside that system? But I'm telling you where we're going, and I'm going to teach on this tomorrow. We must leave behind the former things, because those things are only foundational, one-dimensional. This building had a foundation, and it's just black. But if you're going to build, it is going to become a multi-dimensional building. So when Ray was talking about receiving information from other dimensions, oh, it's happening. It is happening. Now, it just amazes me that we can have someone like Lynn here, and there's not 1,000 people waiting to hear what he has to say.
I know, yeah.
But I know that the MO is not the same as it was before. Lynn can trigger things in you. But just like Mike Clay was telling me earlier today, this last year has been amazing for him because things were triggered in him. And before you know it, the saying of no man will teach you takes over. Because things, these divine intrusions, you wake up with information. From where? They're divine intrusions. So I'm just going to close with this. You know, Jesus said, when they asked him, why don't your disciples fast? John's disciples fast. And he said, why should they fast when the bridegroom is with them? That feminine, the masculine were married inside of him. It produced a whole other dimensional level in their midst. But he said this, there'll come a time when the bridegroom is taken, and then they will fast. And he goes on and says, for who in their right mind would put new wine into an old skin? And who would put a new piece of cloth on an old garment? I had a divine intrusion just a couple of months ago when I was studying this. And I thought, you know, a new wineskin has the capacity to expand, whereas an old wineskin is stretched as far as it can. You put new wine, volatile, expanding, expansive material into an old skin, it'll cause it to rupture, right? And I thought, well, that's our consciousness. We have to make this exchange so that we can contain these things that are incoming, these divine intrusions with information. And I love that explanation. But you know what? The new patch has the opposite quality. What does a new patch do on an old garment when it's washed? Say it louder. It shrinks. So the wineskin expands, but the new cloth contracts. So I'm listening to Lynn, and he's talking about movement and repose, friction and peace. And you were talking today about words that don't have sound being spoken to us. And I've experienced this on many occasions, and I have a feeling we're going to be experiencing more and more of this. But we have to have the ability to expand and contract. Because something is coming upon us and is flowing through us, and it's in the form of extra-dimensional information. How many of you have woken up and all of a sudden you just know something, like what Ray was saying, the God yesterday isn't the God you know today. Guess what you've experienced? A divine intrusion. So be prepared. I think tomorrow is going to herald some very unusual things, but you have to purpose in your heart